Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another rules breakdown. This time I'm going to be looking at this, 13th Age, which came out from Pelgrane Press in 2013. So one of the more modern games I've looked at. Now, this is a Dungeons & Dragons-alike game. It's based on the OGL and contains a number of similar rules. If you play Dungeons & Dragons, this is going to look fairly familiar. However, it does have a bunch of unique rules in it, stuff which is really interesting. And in fact, if we flick over to page 11, if your group wants switch to a new system, luckily you can port some of our best ideas from 13th Age to your own OGL campaign. Our one unique thing, icon relationships and background mechanics could well fit in a typical campaign. Same goes for the campaign map, the icons, and the world description. Increments, escalation die, recoveries, and full heal-ups are portable as well. Help yourselves. As they mention, the team here worked on 3rd edition and 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. So there's a bunch in here you can lift out to enhance a game of Dungeons & Dragons, and I really like the stuff. Now this was a suggestion from a viewer, and I'm really glad they brought it to my attention. I've really enjoyed looking through this. I'm so tempted to play it, but there's a couple of things which I'm a bit hesitant about. I was having a big discussion with one of the guys out in my gaming group about it, and he's thinking about buying it and running it because he's getting bored of running Dungeons & Dragons. So it's a brilliant idea, and I happen to be aware they're doing a Kickstarter at the moment for the 2nd edition of this. I'll try and remember to put the link to the Kickstarter in the description down below, so you can check it out for yourselves. But anyway, let's have a look at the rules of 13th Age. And so skills. Well, 13th Age doesn't really have skills. If we go on to page 41, although it does have skill checks, funnily enough. Making skill checks. D20, so you're just rolling a D20, plus relevant ability modifier, plus level, plus the number of points in a relevant background, versus the DC set by the environment. And we notes down here, normal tier environment DC of 15, hard checks are DC of 20. So you can see they're sort of standard Dungeons & Dragons type DC levels. Going back to page 30, we can see the levels for the ability modifiers. So if you've got a strength of 18, you're getting a +4. If you've got an agility of 17, you're getting a +3. They're kind of standard levels. And you're choosing which ones are relevant. So if you're climbing, it might be agility, it might be strength, depending on the way you describe things. Gives you a bit of flexibility in that. Going back to page 41, what was next? Your level. So if you're 5th level, you add 5. As you go up levels, you get better at everything. Plus the number of points in a relevant background. Well, this is what it uses instead of skills. You see, instead of having skill points to set out in climbing, in history, in nature, whatever, you add them to backgrounds. So the character here, Kasarak, has 8 points to put into backgrounds. His player decides to split the points as follows. Imperial Mage +4, Tooth of the Black Fang, an Assassin Training, +3, Wild Mountain Tribe +1. And then you try to weave those into what's happening. So the example given is you're trying to survive on a mountain, there's exposure on the cold slopes, and the player says, well, I'm an assassin, we're trained to be able to hang out in bad environments to wait for our prey. The Games Master goes for it and gives him the +3 bonus from his Tooth of the Black Fang, Assassin Training. Now, while I like this for storytelling reasons, it slightly annoys me because it does tend to lead to players writing the best backgrounds they can possibly do, which are the most advantageous. I remember a game I played where I wrote the background that my character had Wanderlust, because it suited the background I'd written, the storyline. But that was no bonus. I never got to play that, because wanting to travel from place to place, you couldn't really weave into a story at all. Whereas lots of people chose things which really gave them bonuses all the time. You know, the assassin one seems like something you can play in. And this does give advantage to players who can weave stories. I'm a games master most of the time, and I weave stories kind of naturally. So this kind of situation does bias me, rather than other players who aren't quite so good at just coming up with stuff on the fly. And the DCs, if we flick right on, they're quite far into the book. I believe it's page 185 from my notes. I'll be embarrassed if I get there and it doesn't appear. We have environment DCs for skill checks. So adventurer tier skill checks, this is your sort of low levels. Its normal task is 15, hard task is 20, ridiculously hard task is 25. When you're moving up to champion tier, so about 5th level further on, normal tasks are 20, hard task 25, ridiculously hard task 30. And when you get into your epic tiers, you're getting up to level 9, 10, etc. Normal task is 25, hard task is 30, and ridiculously hard tasks, the DC is 35. And initiative. Well, this is handled in a very similar way to Dungeons & Dragons. If we go back to page 161, we've got combat sequence. Cyclic initiative. Roll once. Each creature rolls to determine its initiative at the start of its first turn in battle. D20 plus initiative bonus. Use those results to determine who goes first each round. So, higher the result, the faster you go. How do you determine it? Well, we've got on page 159, initiative bonus. Your initiative bonus is your dexterity modifier plus your level. Some more dexterous characters go faster than lesser dexterous characters, and your level adds to it. So once you reach 5th level, you're probably going to go faster than 1st level characters, but there's still the randomness of the dice. And what can you do? Well, continuing from page 161, we've got actions on your turn. We've got standard, move, and quick actions, along with free actions. So, the standard sort of array of things you can do in Dungeons & Dragons. But, something that's worth mentioning is the escalation dice here. As the characters fight in battle, they build up momentum and tactical advantages that help them defeat their opponents. This bonus to attacks increases as the fight goes on, as represented by the escalation dice. So, first round, nothing different to normal. But, once you get on to the second round, all the players get a +1 to their dice rolls. At the start of the second round, the GM sets the escalation die at 1. Each PC gains a bonus to attack rolls equal to the current value in the escalation dice. And every round past that, it keeps increasing up to 6. So after 7 rounds, or on the 7th round of combat, you've got a +6 to all your attack rolls. There is a limitation to this, though, that it's 4 players only, and de-escalation. It's the increasing violence in combat. So if the players just hang around in combat, defending, not engaging, to try to get the escalation dice to increase, that's considered gaming the system. And the battle is calming down. The bloodlust's not there. The flow of battle's not with the players because they're not fighting to attack. So the escalation dice does not increase. There's also power triggers. There's various abilities players get, which will only activate once the escalation dice has reached a certain level. So, past about the 3rd, 4th level round of combat, suddenly the players are getting access to other abilities, which will help the combat go in that direction as well. There's also certain monsters which get that as well, so fighting a long battle against these monsters, they become more powerful as the battle goes on. And on to attacking. Well, this looks very familiar if played Dungeons & Dragons. If we go back to page 159. For each attack, roll a d20 plus your ability bonus, so your strength or agility, depending on which weapon you're using, if you're using ranged weapons, etc., plus your level, so it's a straight bonus. If you're 5th level, you're adding +5, plus magic item bonuses against armor class, but sometimes physical defense or mental defense. So you're not always going against armor class, there's opportunities to go against other ratings and for defenders to use those. Now, moving on a few pages, we can see these standard sort of things here. So we've got crits. If you roll an actual 20, you do double damage. However, it does suggest that these lucky hits can have other effects. And the suggestion in here is that while the character might do double damage, they might cut an amulet off an opponent's neck, so removing the abilities that amulet gives. So giving the players advantage in a different way. We've got crit ranges, we've got fumbles. Now fumbles are special here because fumbles do no damage at all. And it specifies that because most attacks will do damage even on a miss. Many attacks specify what happens on a miss. If nothing is noted, then a miss deals no damage. The characters are some of the most exceptional and talented people around. They rarely launch an attack to no effect, so most character attacks deal a small amount of damage on a miss, often equivalent to the attacker's level. So, when you miss, you still scrape the opponent, because you are an exceptional individual. Now, looking at armor classes, if we go right back to page 79 to have a look at the Barbarian, because armor has different effects based on what class you are. So the Barbarian here has a base AC of 10. When they're wearing light armor, they've got 12. When they're wearing heavy armor, they've got 13, with a -2 attack penalty. And when they're carrying a shield, they've got a +1. Going back to page 76, we can see the base AC. It says usual base AC, because that's based on them wearing the standard armor for their class. But we can see Barbarians usually have 12, Paladins usually have 16, because they'll be wearing heavy armor, but they're used to using it, so they get much more effect out of it. And that's the way this system works, that it simplifies it down. You've got light armor, you've got heavy armor, and the weapons are simplified out, as we'll come on to when we go on to damage. And on to damage. Well, as I said before, weapons are simplified out like armor. So they're based into general groups, and generally their effect is based on what class you are. If we go back forward to the Barbarian again, we can see their melee weapons. A dagger does 1d4, a two-handed club does d6, a hand axe does 1d6, a spear does 1d8, a longsword does 1d8, a greatsword does 1d10. And we've got thrown weapons, etc. If we go right on to the Paladin on page 111, we can see there is pretty much similar. They've got 1d4 dagger, 1d6 club, 1d6 for a scimitar short sword, 1d8 for longsword. So it's grouped out to general types. You've got small weapons, you've got light weapons, you've got heavy or martial weapons. You've got one-handed and you've got two-handed. But in addition to that, if we go right forward to page 159, we can see that based on the level, a first level character or fighter attacking with a longsword will deal 1d8 plus strength damage. However, the number of dice goes up according to your level. So a 4th level fighter attacking with a longsword will deal 4d8 plus strength. A 7th level fighter attacking with a longsword will deal 7d8 plus double strength damage, because it's twice the modifier at 7th level. And it does list these in the classes when you get the increases. And that's how damage works. It really ramps up, so you're getting more of your ability bonus as you get higher levels. But every single level, you get an extra dice of damage when using your weapons. And health. Well, 13th Age, being like Dungeons & Dragons, uses hit points. If we look at one of the monsters, if we go right on to page 242, we have the Orcs, and a standard Orc warrior. They have 30 hit points, they've got an AC of 16, physical defense of 14, mental defense of 10. We've got other custom types of Orcs here, Shamans, Great Fang Cadre, etc. But the stat blocks are nice and tidy. They don't have loads of other things. They've got their initiative bonus, they've got their attack with their sword, and they've got any special abilities. So the Orc Warrior just has Dangerous. The crit range of attacks by Orcs expands by 3 unless they are staggered. It keeps it nice and simple. You don't have to do tons of reading. But monsters can be way more powerful. If we go back to page 223, we've got the huge red dragon. Now, it's got loads of abilities. It's got Fangs, Claws and Tail, Fiery Breath, Intermittent Breath, Fear, Resist Fire. And it's got 1,200 hit points. Also got an AC of 28, physical defense of 27, and a mental defense of 23. So it's got loads of hit points, and it's hard to hit, making it a great foe. But remembering, when you get into high levels, the players can be quite beefy as well. If we go all the way back to page 112, to the Paladin, we can see their level progression. So starting off, they get 8 plus con modifier times 3. Let's say you've got a con modifier of 2, that seems fairly standard for a fighter type. So 8 plus 2 is 10, times 3, 30 hit points at first level. You start off being able to resist a couple of hits. And right up at 10th level, it's 8 plus con times 24. So sticking with that plus 2, so it's 10 times 24, 240 hit points. Players can absorb a lot of damage before they start to take death saves. If we go right on to page 169, we can see about those. So you can become staggered when you drop to... staggered is when you're reduced to half your hit points. You're staggered. There aren't any special rules that apply to you when you're staggered. There are a number of monsters that prey upon those who are staggered. Those character powers and spells that function differently when they're used by staggered characters or target staggered characters. So it's a special ability which doesn't have anything of its own, but certain people can take bonuses from that. And certain of your attacks can't work or work differently. We've also got unconscious. When you drop to 0 hit points or below, you go unconscious. You can't take any actions until you're conscious again. You see in the death and dying section below. You're down at 0 hit points, you fall unconscious, you do get to make death saves. But you do keep, unlike 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons where you drop to 0 and that's it, in this you keep track of it. So at negative half, so if you've got 30 hit points and you go to minus 15, you are dead without making any saves. So if you take absolutely massive damage, you can die outright without making any death saves. And healing, of course, is through the standard methods, usually magical healing, taking potions, healing spells, etc., as well as resting. An advancement. Well, this is a Dungeons & Dragons type game, and it uses levels. However, it doesn't use experience points. If we go to page 189... Levelling up. We've both presided over editions of D20 game that tracked experience using experience points. In practice, we think that XP systems are better left to computer games. We generally let the characters advance a level after 3 to 4 full heal-ups, or in other words, between 12 and 16 serious battles. So it's milestone advancement. But rather than milestone by when you complete an adventure, this is by the number of battles. So it seems to be keeping track of things in a slightly different way. However, I suppose the Games Master can run it however they want. It mentions that the whole party levels up together. We've also got the benefits of levelling up. +1 to attacks, defences and skill checks, additional die of damage with weapon attacks, more hit points by class, additional feats, ability to wield an additional magic item. 4th, 7th and 10th level you add +1 to 3 different ability scores, rather than having +2 that you can add to 1 or 2 as Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition does. This you need to add them to different ones. 5th and 8th level gain an additional icon relationship point and possibly more talents depending on your class. Possibly more powers and spells. It also mentions incremental advance, where instead of waiting till a level to give everything, the Games Master can hand out certain elements so the characters improve constantly, so the players get a benefit of what they're doing rather than having to wait for that levelling up and getting everything all at once. And so that's the briefest of brief looks at 13th Age. There's a whole load of great ideas in here. From the way that feats work, where you've got individual feats for your different classes, as well as general feats that everybody can choose from. We've got the different types of attacks, especially amongst fighters, where depending on what the dice roll, they can have different effects. If they fail to hit, they can fight defensively. If they roll odd, they get certain effects. If they roll even, they get other effects. If the increment dice, as the battle moves on, has reached a certain amount, they get access to abilities. The way that spells work, where if you can target a group of people, you get a lesser effect across them, so lesser damage. Or you can target a single person and do more damage. Or healing effects, or Bless does it as well, where you can affect people. So spells are far more able to be flexible. The attacks are more flexible. There's just so many options in here for players, and obviously I've barely touched on anything in here. In one video, it's not possible to go through absolutely everything. It's a fantastic game, and options and flexibility is at its core. As I mentioned earlier, one of the other players in my groups decided to have a look at it because they are finding 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to be a bit boring, as there's just not enough options for the players to do. It's they roll, they hit, they do damage, blah, 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 blah. Whereas 13th Age just gives you so many options and so much flexibility. Definitely worth a look, and thank you to the viewers out there that recommended it and the people that voted for me to have a look through it. Anyway, as usual, I think I've been wittering on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.